My grandfather was killed on Albert's farm. His mother made him look after my grandfather's grave. So for 3 years he would tend it, put flowers on there.
Our father never told us about this story. We keep in touch to keep the memory of his grandfather and my father.
I'm sitting opposite Paul Harris and Michel Prunier. We'll come on to talk about your connection, but Paul, you are the grandson of George Hanks.
That's right, Private George Hanks.
Tell me a bit about your journey in discovering your grandfather's story.
Well, about 11 years ago, my mother gave me a box of love letters that were written by my grandfather George from when he was here in Normandy in 1944. My mother was only a year old when George was killed, so she could never read them. And she handed them to me, and I started researching George's travels, researching through Imperial War Museum, military records and regiment records, which led me to Normandy, to eventually where he was killed in a tiny commune called Etry, which is about 40 miles south of the memorial.
And that's how you met Michel?
Yes,
or Michel's
father, Albert.
Yeah.
So in April 2016, there was a reception ceremony at Etry, and they very kindly adopted my grandfather as their own soldier. While we were there, we met Albert, and it transpires that my grandfather was killed on Albert's farm. And when Albert was just 12 years old, Nazi SS soldiers put a gun to his head, demand milk and butter. To help him cope with the trauma, his mother made him look after my grandfather's grave. So for 3 years he would tend it, put flowers on there, until the body was eventually moved to the Commonwealth War Graves Cemetery at St Charles de Percy.
Our father never told us about this story. He was a person who was really discreet.
Very modest.
Very
quiet.
modest.
Yes. Yeah.
He was only 12 years old, and he kept a very bad memory of this part of his life.
Yes.
And he didn't really told us about this story, but we tried to stay, we keep in touch to keep the memory of his grandfather and my father.
When you first met Albert, what was his reaction?
He was a bit nervous about coming forward and telling us the story in case it upset us. He took us to the spot where my grandfather was killed and was buried. We drove down this track and he was stood there to attention, and he was very smartly dressed with all his medals on, and clearly it meant something to him. Through meeting him, though, it gave closure to my mother, because she'd always felt the body should have been repatriated, which of course would never happen. But through meeting Albert, we knew that George had been looked after, and it gave Mum closure that he was at rest with his mates being looked after.
How old was George when he died?
He was 30, so he was relatively old compared to some of many of the people that were killed here. He'd come to fight because he'd grown up best friends with a chap called Arthur Holton, and they were inseparable as kids. So I think he volunteered because all his friends were doing it.
Did they serve together?
No. So Arthur was in the Navy. He sadly didn't make it either. He was somewhere off Africa, and he fell sick on the ship.
There were two sets of parents from the same
village, close friends.
Lost their children. When did he land?
He landed just after D-Day. I think it was the 17th of June, after he was part of the 2nd British Army. He was working on the land, he was a labourer, volunteered fairly early in the war. I know he was training in Oxford to begin with the Oxford and Bucks Light Infantry. He went out to Northern Ireland and various places to train. He was transferred to the 10th Highland Light Infantry just before D-Day. That really upset my grandmother because she didn't have to accept it, and as a man with a family, I know it wound her up. She was upset over that.
Do you know the circumstances under which he was killed?
It was during Operation Bluecoat. On the 6th of August, there was kind of a concave semicircle forming around Etry as the Allies advanced, and the British thought they'd pass straight through. Rather than passing straight through, the road was heavily mined. There was Panzer tanks providing covering fire across the minefield. The church was a machine gun nest, and it was heavily fortified to be held at all costs. It was house fighting, and the place was destroyed, and it was, I think, 450 people were killed, including 16 French civilians. The Brits were trying to get round the churchyard as dusk fell. The A Company from the Highland Light Infantry had managed to get to this orchard. They dug in for the night. Just after midnight, the Germans launched the last counter-offensive in Normandy, and he was killed by mortar.
Michel, when you arrived here today with Paul, did Paul take you to see George Hanks's name on one of the columns?
I think it's a very good memory, it's the best place. We need to have this memory for all the the young people, and it made us connected.
Yes.
Yeah. Telling the story of people like your grandfather, George, how do you think we should use those stories to not just keep history alive, but actually why it matters today?
There is a lot of trouble in the world at the moment. We have to remember back to events of 1944 and how we got there, and the sacrifices that were made by people on all sides for freedom and the liberty we've enjoyed for many, many years. And let's hope we never have to go through it again.